In this video, we're going to look at what is freedom of expression and what are its limitations. So much of the work that I do in the world of helping people build and grow thought leader, coaching, and consulting businesses is based on one basic concept of freedom of expression. The idea that each human has the right and the possibility to express themselves in the way that they were born to express themselves. And at the same time, what I run into again and again with clients is this fear of expression. Like, what'll happen if I fully showed up in the world? If I fully shared what I really thought, people might reject me. And I'm telling you that is the most common thing, especially for people like speakers and authors who are bringing new ideas to the world. They're often afraid of being rejected, of their ideas being rejected, of being ridiculed. And you might think, well, maybe that's not a big deal, intellectually speaking. Like, from a rational perspective, it's not like they're going to die, right? If somebody hates their work. But the fact is that in the past, in the evolution of human history, people have died for their ideas. People have been killed because they presented something new in the world. So even if that's not happening today, and by the way, it is happening today, but even if it weren't happening at the scale that it used to, that's still part of our evolutionary history. And you can think about it in a bunch of different ways. You can think about it biologically, physiologically, right? There's something called epigenetics that you may or may not be familiar with, which is how we pass down information from generation to generation. And guess what? We've discovered recently that we actually do pass down fear and trauma from generation to generation. So as we start to look at freedom of expression and stepping into our fullest expression of our gifts and our thoughts and our ideas and our message, there might be an old ancestor of like a few generations ago that's passed down their fear of, being burned at the stake like a witch, right? And so these are real fears that we have to deal with as humans. If we were to go too far afield of the tribe, we might be banished from the tribe. And maybe that was 10,000 or 12,000 years ago, but the fact is that's still encoded in our systems. And it's really still encoded also from a spiritual, energetic perspective in our collective unconscious. So it's something to address. If you're someone who, if you're speaker, author, coach, consultant, you're looking to step into your fullest expression, chances are you're going to run into some fear. So let's talk about that a little more deeply. So first off, where does freedom of expression even come from? Like, what is this concept? And it's really interesting because depending on who you talk to and different belief systems, you'll find different answers. And I truly believe that there are a lot of different valid answers. I really intend always to respect different perspectives and points of view. And generally what I've seen is they fall into two camps. There's the one camp that believes that freedom of expression is an innate human right that we're born with. That by virtue of being a human and being born on this planet, we have the right to be able to express ourselves. And that right comes from God or from our creator or from whatever larger thing they believe in the world. I'll share with you, this is my belief. I believe that these rights, these are part of our inalienable human rights by virtue of just being human on this planet. And then there's a camp of people that really believe that our rights are agreed upon, that they're given to us by society, by government, by the collective. By being in a community, we have to conform, and that there's an agreement field there, and that by virtue of being born into a culture or a system or a society, we need to follow the rules of expression for that society. So these are kind of two seemingly opposing camps, and that kind of creates a lot of problems, especially if you look around at the world right now. There are people that believe that freedom of expression should never be limited for any reason, and then there are people that believe that it should be limited for a lot of different reasons. And of course, there are people that fall all along the spectrum in between. So how does freedom of expression protect individual liberty? So this is a really deep and interesting question. So I'm not going to be able to go into the full depth of it, but I think what this question really gets at is, to what extent does our freedom get curtailed in order to live in a good and just community. If you want to live in community, you've got to respect certain rules. And I absolutely believe that. And so what it comes down to is that, and this is my opinion right now, that when we have freedom of expression, when each person has the ability to fully express themselves and their opinions and their beliefs and fully live in alignment with those beliefs, as long as they're not hurting other people, that they should be free to do that. Now, the problem comes when there's disagreements and when some people don't like what another person believes or thinks or says. And that's where we can get into a situation, what I think is a dangerous situation, where we curtail someone's freedom to express. Because what happens is, in my opinion, when people are curtailed, when it's like, okay, no, you can't say that anymore. No, you can't believe that anymore. No, that's wrong. What generally tends to happen is that those beliefs end up going underground. And when things go underground, they go into what I call the shadows. And you no longer can talk about them, and you no longer can debate them, and you no longer can discuss them. And I think that what happens is things in the shadows tend to fester. Whereas when beliefs are brought out into the light and we're able to argue about them and discuss them with respect, obviously, then I think that ultimately as humans, we're fundamentally good and the best ideas tend to win. But what happens is certain ideas, like remember when they were burning books, right? Those ideas had to go underground. And when things go underground, I think it takes a lot longer. They fester, and it takes a lot longer for the thing to come to light again and for the light to expose the truth. When things go underground, I think that's where we get misinformation and we get all these terrible things that we want to avoid, but we're creating it by sending the thing underground. So some people ask, is freedom of expression an absolute right? And the truth is, it's not. Not in any culture, in any society, in any country ever. The United States is one of the countries that kind of took the biggest stand for freedom of expression a few hundred years ago after the American Revolution. And even in the United States, we've seen limitations on the freedom of expression. For example, you're not allowed to yell fire in the middle of a crowded movie theater. You're not allowed to use freedom of expression to lie and create mayhem and to create something that will hurt people. Now, of course, it's a slippery slope. Once we start curtailing freedom of expression, what ends up happening, like I said earlier, some of those ideas end up going underground. So I'm a big proponent of limiting it as little as possible, even if that means hurting people's feelings, even if that means offending people, even if that means triggering people. And why do I think that? Because I think hurting, offending, and triggering are ways to bring wounds to the surface so that we can work on them, so we can heal them, so we can talk about them. And I think that when we try to coddle too many people's feelings and worry too much about offending people, in my personal opinion, then we lose the opportunity to have those deep conversations and really make change in the world. So I'm a big proponent of limiting it as little as possible, of course, without physically hurting people or doing something horrible like that. So is it absolute? No, it's not. But I believe the closer we can get to absolute freedom of expression, the more open dialogue we're going to have and the more progress we're going to make towards the evolution of our planet. All right, by the way, I'm fully aware that this is a delicate conversation right now, and so I'm really curious. I would love to know what you think about it. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Guess what? I can be with both of those things. Just do it in the comments below, and please be respectful. Lastly, I'm going to answer the question, are there times when freedom of expression needs to be limited? I already kind of answered that before, but I'll just say that if and when it will be limited, I think there are two really important questions to ask. Number one, who's doing the limiting? I think we have to be really careful about how expression is limited, who's doing the limiting. For example, when I gather my people together and I come into a retreat environment or an event, I'm the leader of that space, and people have a choice if they want to enter that space with me or not. When they decide to enter that space, we create certain agreements. I lay out, here are the guidelines. We're going to communicate respectfully. We're going to communicate transparently. And everybody agrees to those guidelines, or maybe they don't agree and they don't want to be a part of it anymore. That's fine. But there's a big difference between people coming in and choosing and helping me decide even what those parameters are versus a government or a corporation or some large entity deciding what is and what is not okay. I think we want to be really careful when we give that power to our rulers, to our leaders, to our government. Because actually, when I say leaders and rulers as a government, in the United States at least, the role of our government is to serve us, the people, not the other way around. So if the government and these large entities are limiting our expression, I think that could end up being very dangerous. I'd rather have situations where we, the people, are deciding what limitations we want to have, and also obviously considering the Constitution. And then the second thing to think about when limiting freedom of expression, because we really want to be careful with that, it's a slippery slope, is how is it being limited, right? It's one thing, to limit yelling fire in a crowded theater, and it's quite another to ban or outlaw certain ideas just because we don't like them or agree with them. And so who's doing the limiting, and also what is being limited and how? What are the parameters for that? Is it just because it offends people, or is it truly like, an incitement to violence, which is, absolutely something that should be limited. So those are some things to think about. I know this is a kind of an unusual topic for me, but it's been coming up a lot as I've been working with people who are thinking about, what's the message I want to bring to the world? How do I want to show up? And really feeling limited lately about what they can express without feeling danger, without feeling the risk of being rejected or ousted or canceled, God forbid. Lastly, a question I hear all the time is, does the freedom of expression include the right to offend? It's a really interesting conversation because I think that we need to look at whether you believe offending someone is due to the person doing the offending or the person who's feeling offended. Now, in the world that we live in today, where, everybody wants to be wonderful and help people and uplift people, there's a desire not to offend for the most part. And so, a lot of times there's a lot of blame put on the person doing the offending. Now, I take a little bit of a different view. In my world, in my life, in my experience, and with my clients, I've found that it's very valuable for the offended person to take the responsibility. Okay, I know that sounds weird, but what I'm saying is that when you, instead of saying, okay, I feel offended and it's your fault for offending me, rather turning it around and saying, I feel offended, what's going on in me that's creating that reaction? Now, it's not to remove any responsibility from the other person or say that people shouldn't communicate respectfully. They should. And also, what you can find is where you feel offended is often something really valuable and important for you. So it can be a source of wisdom. It can be a source of understanding, wow, this is a place where I have a wound that I haven't really healed yet. Being offended is actually a way to grow. Feeling anger, feeling, passionate, feeling like you want to fight back. These are all access to purpose, to passion, to growth. I'll tell you in my own life, the areas where I've had anger, where somebody has offended me has often been a source for activity, for action, for fuel. Remember, I told the story in another video, I think, about how I founded the Women's Success Summit after I'd gotten out of a job where I was discriminated against a lot for being a woman. And so because of that, I didn't get a lawyer and fight back and, accuse them or do anything like that. What I did was I created this new thing from my offense, from my anger. If we try to create a world where nobody gets offended and nobody has any negative emotions all the time, it's going to be very one-dimensional. People don't have the opportunity to grow, to learn, to expand, to evolve. So I believe that fundamentally, it's not even something we want to do to get rid of offending people or offenses. In fact, it's probably a good thing to foster dialogue and conversation. I hope that you got value from this video. Please, like I said before, comment, subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.